So let's welcome our next speaker. It's Brian Postlethwaite, and he will guide us through template-based extraction process, comparing with other approaches available in FireSDC. Brian, you have a couple of minutes to set up everything. What time is it on your side, by the way?
It's about 10 after midnight.
So great, thanks for
No problem. So Ilya is not in this time zone, or he's about to not be. But Sean's got a session coming up a little bit later, and I think he's over in Adelaide, so he's half an hour better off. But it's still not going to be great when he gets up, when his turn, I should
some
say.
coffee definitely will help. So
That's right.
take it
That's
over to
right.
you.
Excellent. Let me share my screen. Pick the correct screen to share. So all set to go then? Excellent. All right. So I'm going to go through SDC extract. So a little bit about me. So I work in Microsoft Research Name, apparently. Probably should have edited that in. But yeah, I'm a senior software engineer there. One of the editors and contributors to the SDC spec. Also been a heavy implementer of SDC for many years, since very early in the DSTU2 cycle. So I've been doing that. And if you use the fhirpath-lab, I'm the creator of that, and also one of the editors on the FirePath spec, and have lots of open source goodies. Really enjoy that. So, in today's session, I'm sort of going to go through a general flow of information with SDC, really to highlight where does extract fit in, have a quick look at the use case that I'm going to go through as an example of each of the different approaches so that you can get a good view on how they go together. And as Lloyd pointed out, there's observation, definition, template, which is new, and I'm going to go into more depth with that one because it's so new. And I've also got a blog post that's going to be coming out around that very shortly. And then there's structure map, which I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just point out where some of that information is. And just to note that we sort of missed that the SDC spec that Lloyd pointed out is the R3 version of it. There's an R4 version which is currently being balloted and is going through ballot reconciliation, and that's the version that has the new template definition in it. And there's also heaps and heaps of updates and clarifications in there. So yeah, please have a look at the latest version, which is this one, if you're going and implementing stuff, because there will be additional detail in there, which is really good. So, what's the information flow? We sort of had a little bit of a touch on it from Lloyd, and then another bit of a look from Ilya. But basically, we have our fire questionnaire. It has embedded in that some pre-population rules and some extraction rules. And so we can pass those out to a pre-population service, which can run those, which will pull the information out of launch contexts, out of fire services, out of other fire documents, or it could be custom content to pull in something else. And that'll produce a fire questionnaire response, which we then go and throw in the UI into the editor, and the users interact with that and work with that. And once they're happy that that's now complete and they can save it to the store, we then go through the extract service, which can run and pull that content out into another resource. So we sort of saw Ilya's custom version, creating some patients and allergy intolerances, etc. And that's the sort of area that we're going to walk into today and sort of cover the extraction side. Before I jump in there, so when you extract, you really want to have all the information you're going to need to be able to perform that extraction. So if it was going to be updating a content, you'll need to have the IDs that it needs to go and update for the resources with. So sometimes you need to go and embed some additional hidden properties for resource IDs, which could come through the pre-population service. But just be aware when you're designing your extract, is this resource going to be put back into the same system? So with Ilya's example, he was loading up a patient record, so patient resource, I should say, then editing that and then storing it back. That's one use case. But if you're sending it out to another service, then you're going to have different needs to what that definition should look like. Um, so you'll want to actually tag accordingly. So if I'm creating a referral, then you want to have the basic information of the patient. And yeah, you're not going to be necessarily creating it, but you might be. So that's just a little bit of a caveat. So where is the data extraction defined in the spec? So it's defined, this is the January version, so our ballot for the R4 version. You need to have a target, and we're going to create or update it. You need a mapping, you need a processing engine, and quite often you'll need to know what's the target structure. What am I going to put it in? Is it a profiled resource? Is it just a bare resource? What shape do I want to create it? So with Ilya's sample, he had a mapping, which was, I think was Jute was the language, which is some combination of some YAML and some FHIRpath. And then he has his engine, so that's the map, and then his engine that runs through it. So with the samples I'm going to show, these will all be running onto my a nearly open source implementation. The actual code is in a gist, so it's available, but it's not in a library at the moment. But we'll come back to that at the end. And yes, so we have the current extract observation, definition, template, and structure map. And I'll walk through each of those in a little bit of detail, just so you can get an idea of what it is. We have our extract. The output is a bundle and or an operation outcome to tell you if there were any issues associated with that extraction or if it just straight up failed. And I'll just click on that so we can see, is that going to somewhere interesting? So this is what the spec looks like, just to come into it. And so it goes through and gives a lot of the samples and then talks about the service a little bit and then each of the details. And just so you get an idea, that's where you go to go and see this stuff. So I won't walk through that. We've got samples. So the extract operation itself can either be sent direct to the questionnaire response and post the questionnaire response to it. So this is really useful if you've got a service which isn't storing the questionnaire responses, but just processing them for extraction. So you don't have to have the questionnaire response stored, and then you can pass the questionnaire in with that as well. So you can have questionnaire response and questionnaire. So the actual extraction service doesn't even need to know either of those two things to perform its work. But often the case, you actually run a post or a get to the base questionnaire response ID extract, where you actually know what it is. It's stored there, the questionnaire is stored there, so it can just run directly. And yeah, if they're posting, then it's a parameters resource with no parameters in it. The ID is enough. And once again, the output is the transaction bundle or an operation outcome. So our example use case is we've got two to pick from. I'm going to pick the simple one as we go through this session, but there are two available. I've got them up on GitHub, so Brian Poss SDC by example, and then there's an extraction. Actually, let me click. So as we go in there, there's an extraction area, and you'll find these samples under there, so complex and simple. And each of those is with the different approaches are in there, so which is kind of neat. So we'll be going through that. So the simple one is a single Boolean field, and the complex one has the patient demographics, some contacts, and then 3 observations. So you get a feeling for what is easy and what is hard about each of the different approaches, and you can directly compare them with the same examples. So that was the whole point of using that. So I'll step forward. So observation extract. So I will spend most of my time in the template area. So I will just quickly touch on each of the other options. So the observation extract uses the item.code for the LOINC, SNOMED, or other codings to be extracted. A category gives you an option to go and put that content in. Is subject. So if you've got multiple subjects within your questionnaire, so if you had a maternity style admission form that had postnatal, you'd have the baby's name and the mother's name. You could have those as 2 separate subjects, and so that would be something you'd use is subject for. Or if you had a couple coming in, you might have 2 subjects in that. So there's multiple use cases where you could want multiple subjects. And observation extract is the actual tag you put on, which is just a Boolean that says extract anything from this point. So if you put it on a single item, then it'll just extract that item. If you put it at the root, it'll extract anything, all the items in the questionnaire that have an item.code. You can, if you do that, you can put it at the top and then say, well, I don't want this specific one. So question 3, I don't want to create out to an observation. So you can say extract false for that one. So you can do true at the top and then turn off the ones that you don't want, or you can leave none and then just tag the ones you want individually. Group components can create components, observation style components with that. And I've got 2 samples. If you note, if you grab the slides later on, there are these little links down the bottom, which you can click. And of course, that's going to open on the other window. And so this is our sample. So have you had a sigmoid? Yes, I have. And then we can click show response to see what that is. So this was the L-Forms rendering engine. Here's our have you got one? Yes, I have. Here's the subject and the author. And so now I can click the extract button. We can see here's our bundle. Here's our observation with a whole heap of stuff created in. So here's our coding, which is our the subject, effective. So these are all the properties that are filled in. And now I note that there's no link back to the questionnaire response. So if I go back to my questionnaire response and say, well, this is actually now a stored one, and then go and extract that, we'll now see that we get it derived from saying that came from that questionnaire response. So I had that capacity to know which was which. So if I go to the LH forms, and we can click on that again. So let's switch to a different renderer and click. So we can see within our questionnaire, it just says extract everything at the top. And then so if I come down, we'll look at our simple question. So this is a super simple form, 1 question, and it says here's our screening codes, extract, and then let's run that. And so there we go, there's our value false when it comes from the other. So that's really all it is tag it to say, yes, put it in, have a code, and that will produce this level of detail. So kind of neat. And another one there, just to see one that's slightly more complicated. So this one has pre-pop and extract, if I'm not mistaken. And just put some very rubbishy answers. These are good. And so this particular one ends up here. We've got a couple of calculations, observation for pre-population, nothing there. So if we come down, we should end up finding our question. So here's another validation extension constraint, kilograms, and here's our tag to say extract this weight question. And so there's our weight question, and it has the code. So that's kind of cool. So if I just false turn that one off and then extract, so now I can see that it goes away. So kind of neat. Okay, so that was the observation approach. So the definition approach is basically everything ties back down to the item.definition. So item.definition is driven into a profile. So you can have, so profiles look like a canonical URL to a profile. So hl7.org/vi/structure definition/observation. So that's the canonical URL for an observation, and then I can reference the specific property. So observation.comment is the path in that structure definition. So I can straight up tag that with that property. You can leech each item, you can have supporting groups, and then if you've got actual profiles, so where you've got fixed values and patterns, then they will automatically be processed as well. So you can use that. And you can't do complex split joins or calculations. So your structure, shape of your questionnaire must be pretty close to what's going into the structure definition. But if you already have that, then this is a really good fit. And I do have a walkthrough on that, but we will have a quick look at what does this look like. Clicks. So what does this look like? We end up with our SDC definition extract to say, yes, extract this. And in this example, we're going to create an observation. We then have our item extract value. So we're going to say, when I'm producing, actually, let's close up those extensions for a start. So we've got a case where we're going to say, here's our definition to say, extract out this value. So let's just fill one in. So yes, extract, and there it is. So we say, yes, there's our required Boolean, and that's going into value X in the observation. So that's where our value X is in that observation. So just to show that this is not being faked. Yep, there we go. So that's in. So how did the rest of all this content get populated? So that's via the item extract value. So this is where you can go and extract other data elements. And so once that gets populated, it will then say, well, this observation status is going to get a fixed value of final. We're going to also put in this fixed value for the coding. So here's the observation code.coding, and it's going to populate that out. And you'll notice that I don't need to say every layer. You can just go to where you want to be. So that's as much as I want to walk into there, because there is that walkthrough on there. But it's sort of good to see. Actually, I will just touch on that one. So here's another demo of it, where you end up with something like a person's details. So Brian Ross, and I've got a code of C1 and a code of C3 issued by me. And because Ilya was presenting earlier, we're going to have him do that. We're going to extract that. And so we can see here we've got Brian Post, that's the name I typed in, gender, and there's some qualifications. And you'll note that I didn't type in that certificate through community care. That came from fixed data in the profiles. So that's kind of neat. But I won't walk into any of that any further. So template based with 7 minutes to go. So this is the new content. You can either do it as a single bundle or as individual resources templated. So which is template extract is the individual approach, or template extract bundle. We gave both options because some people may want to do it as the complete bundle, but I think the extract resource by resource will be more useful, which is the sample that I'm going through. We have a template extract context, which once you've entered your point to say, okay, from this point, create a new resource. And then within that resource template, we can then go through it and then say, well, from this item in the questionnaire or this group, we want you to walk in and start creating contacts or create a related person. So you can change that. And then we've got our extract value. So they are all of the extensions associated, so which is kind of nice. So you can either define them at the root of a questionnaire or on child items, and each of the bundle entry. So you can control what's going on into the bundle entry with that context, and then you can repeat. So every time there's a repetition of that item answer, you'll get a new resource extracted. So when you put in that template extract. So, and yeah, so that's what it looks like when you go and include them. And you say, I'm going to refer to observation template. And here we've got our resource ID because we can't put extensions on a resource ID because it's an ID property that has no extensions. So we need to drive that. And so populating that bundle entry, we can drive the request method. But basically, we don't need to set that in the questionnaire. The actual existence of that resource ID, whether that's got a value or not, indicates whether it's going to be a put or a post. So if you make your template populate the resource ID, then that's going to be a put. Otherwise, it's going to be a post. The request URL will be driven by the process. And then we've got if none match. So all of these properties you have control to put in that template. Then our context. So let's go and have a look at a demo. So which one are we looking at? We're looking at our simple one. So let's just make sure it works straight up. So yes, there's the value, there's our template. So let's see, what do we actually have? We have our extraction to say, yes, we need a template. We want to use the observation template in there. So there's our template extract. And we're going to put obs temp, which is kind of funny. We've got that there, obs temp 2, just to show that that's actually what's happening. Yeah, obs temp 2, so that's real. Cool. So we link up to our resource. So here's our contained resource. It's the observation with obs template, which is our obs template. Excellent. And so we can see here that it's really extracts by example. So with Ilya's that custom approach, he had sort of a template of that resource in YAML and then had some FHIRPath embedded into some of the properties. So it's very similar to this, except this is the actual resource. And so we've got final, came from final. So all this stuff is canned straight from the resource. And where I actually want to substitute that value, then we use our extract value to say, go and grab a value out of the questionnaire. And so depending on where you put your extension, so in this case, it was at the root. So your expressions here are evaluated from the root of the questionnaire response. And so we've got resource.subject, resource.authored, and here's the case where we go resource item where link ID is complicated, answer value. So that was the only one we need. And it's very explicit as to what's going on. So kind of neat. And if we go to our next one, so yeah, the extract value. So it's via that FHIRPath expression. We get the context comes from the template extract context. If we use that, if there's no value for the item, then there's no data in the output. This is not supported on resource ID or element ID. We have a workaround for the resource ID, which you sort of saw, but there's no way to drive the element ID property. But that's not used all that often. Okay. And that's just our sample of our extract value, which we went through. And given we're short, I'll skip the extract bundle and just summarize that it's basically exactly the same, except you have the bundle, refer the bundle, and then you have to process everything inside the bundle extraction. Structure map is very much the same, so I'll click in to go and see what that looks like. And really, it's exactly the same form where it's super tiny. And then you just say, here, link off, run this FML on, or this structure map via mapping language against the questionnaire response to produce the output. And so if we go and go tick, yes, run, and we get the same sort of output. There's our value true. And what does that look like? And that's what these sort of maps look like. So they can be reasonably complicated, but they can also be pretty simple. So extract a bundle, create an entry, put these values in, create an observation. Here's our populated, and there's the set all the values. And so you can see here we can still use our FHIRpath embedded as well, which is good. And do test with fhirpath-lab, which is all open. There's tooling out there for TypeScript and JavaScript. CSRO have some. NLM has some. There's FHIRpath.js, which is running. And there's the music. Excellent. And do test with the lab. It's super good. And here's our question space. And just because I am there in there, if you're working with FHIRpath expressions, where is that? There is a new experience coming. So this is the latest version of the lab, and I'm working on getting a expression editor so that when you run an expression like this, you can run that. And then you can step through each of the steps through that, which is super neat. And that'll also work on the FHIRpath.js engine. So you can step in and you can see what was the focus, step, 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 step. And you can see what happens as it's running through, and also in the happy engine, step, 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 which is super useful. Anyway, questions?
Thanks, Brian. There's a question from a gentleman whose name is Nikolai, and he asks, can I extract different resources for different use cases from same questionnaire?
Definitely. So with all of the approaches, they all have support for that. No, except for observation. Observation only does observations. But any of the other approaches, you just put a new template. So if you wanted to extract to a patient, in fact, I do have samples for that in that content. But yeah, you just put a new template for each of the different things. So if you wanted to have two different forms of observation using two different templates, just put in two contained templates and reference them from the appropriate questions.
Great, thanks. There's one more question here. John is a bit confused about this. He asks, what tools can be used to build questionnaires which enable the observation based on extraction? FHIRpath-lab, NLM for Builder, or Smart Forms?
That's cool. So yeah, the FHIRpath-lab is just a test tool. You can, if you want to go on hand, create content by all means. You can go and put that in there. The NLM form builder, I'm sure Paul is going to be talking about that later. They've got a good section of that. You can certainly put in extensions and also the code property. So I'm pretty sure you could build that with that. Yeah, I hope that answers the questions.
Yeah, you will also see 8-box demos of the form builder built by Health
Yep.
Samurai today. So you
Yeah.
can easily get a deeper understanding on what cases can be handled.
Yeah.
And my final question is when 8-box forms renderer will be added to the FHIRpath-lab.
So if I go back into the lab, so the renderer, So he was going, here's our sample bit of everything questionnaire.
Uh,
That's the CSO, and that's the
yeah.
aid box renderer. So yes, the Health Samurai's done all the work there, and it's good. But given the way that, excuse me, that all of this content is live between each of the difference. So when I go back over to here, actually show response and go back to here, the content should flow naturally between. Show response, go back. Because it's live, I need to put more in the way to make it a conscious choice of the configuration. So the user knows that that information is leaving the browser or leaving the fhirpath-lab platform. With the FirePath expressions, when you run those, so when I flick over, go to tester, you make an explicit choice. I want to choose which engine. And so you can see here's the 8-box FirePath engine. It's
And
explicitly,
others, right? So like
yeah,
fhirpath-lab is the right place for all the participants of the conference to take a look and
correct.
start.
Yeah, yeah, cool. But anyway, it will be coming. So, and yeah, do questions. So, the others missed it. Go to Zulip. That's where you go and ask questions, and we will be helping you out there. So please, if you've got questions, go to the chat. Cool.
Thank you so much.